So finally, John Gilligan has secured his release, having somehow managed to raise €10,000 for his freedom. He's been in custody since last Christmas, before Christmas. And we reported just weeks ago that this kind of begging text had gone out to people who knew him.
Yeah.
It had been passed around the Costa Blanca over the summer months, saying that John Gilligan was a good guy. He'd always helped other people out.
Yeah, his good work.
He'd always been generous and helped people out when they needed it. And now he really needed it. He was stuck in prison and he needed to raise money. And there was details of an account that could have been utilised for anybody who wanted to donate to this.
Yeah.
Gilligan appeared to have had difficulties getting a lawyer to represent him to secure his bail. So he's got bail. €10,000 has been secured. And he's out for the first few days in over 8 months. 73 years of age. And still he will face, in the future, this continued investigation into his dealings with pink cocaine, which he was caught with at a 2-bedroom property belonging to his ex-partner. So, what next for Gilligan?
Well, I mean, 10 grand is quite a bit to have raised. He will have, obviously, we know for a fact that he was leaning on people he knew over the years. So he's unlikely to skip that bail. Although the conditions of the bail aren't being made public, they're likely to include the fact that he wouldn't be allowed to leave the country without permission anyway. So he'll probably stay around the Costa Blanca. These cases in Spain, the drugs cases actually can be slightly quicker than some of the murder cases we've seen with Irish expats over there. That can really take a long time. So he'll probably come back before the courts, maybe in the calendar year. In the meantime, John Gilligan, he'll be probably living on social welfare.
Well, he ain't going back, I imagine, to the home of Sharon Martin, who very generously allowed him to stay there after the last bust-up, when she was even caught up in that case where he had been using the postal system to send drugs back to the UK.
So Sharon Martin, or Sharon Oliver, she was somebody that John Gilligan had fallen in love with or struck up a relationship. In recent years, obviously John Gilligan had been married for a long time to Geraldine Gilligan. She'd been in and out of the courts on his behalf for many, many years over the Jessbrook property that they brought together. But Sharon was a UK national, and she'd kind of taken up John Gilligan's cause in recent years, seemed very devoted to him. She would put up some pictures of him on social media. And as you said, she'd been caught up in that case, in that she'd been charged as a result of John Gilligan's drug dealing activities. But ultimately she was found not guilty. And she'd really seemed to have been his prime supporter on the Costa. But at some point, young love hadn't run smooth, had it?
No, as far as I know, she sort of suspected that he was getting involved in cocaine and didn't like that, and, you know, could put up maybe with some of the, because a lot of those drugs are actually legalised in Spain.
Yeah,
you know,
because it wasn't just cannabis he was
and
sending
weed
back.
and all that sort of stuff.
Well, it was actually the prescription tablets was a big bit of it, the benzodiazepines, which aren't illegal to buy in Spain.
Yeah. I don't know whether they are legal to buy over the counter in Spain. I think, funny enough, some of the drugs that people traditionally used to buy over the counter in Spain and bring back, there seems to be a changing of the laws. Okay. I mean, even down to the Voltarols and stuff, which you need a prescription for, which are a muscle relaxant if you've pulled a muscle or whatever. But nonetheless, there has been a much more, in Spain, you can grow a certain amount of cannabis for personal use. You can join a club, and that allows you purchase and shares, etc. So it's much laxer over there. But my understanding is that she was kind of, you know, she wasn't going to go apeshit about that, but she didn't like the idea of him getting involved in cocaine. Of course, we had heard that he was literally nearly street dealing anything. Yeah. He's down in his luck. He's been trying to make money. He certainly has never returned to the wealth that he once had, but has a certain lifestyle he likes to take up. So she had returned to the UK in a kind of a make or break it situation and left him back in Spain, was generous enough to allow him stay in her apartment because he seems to have problems with, having a home to live in at this
Totally.
point.
I mean, like there was always, obviously John Gilligan owned a number of properties over there. And it was suspected he owned even more at the time. He was originally put behind bars in Ireland for, I think he got a very, very lengthy sentence for cannabis stealing. But there is a belief that while he might have kept some money and properties away from the Criminal Assets Bureau, whatever money he had, he seems to have gone through.
Well, in 2013, they were selling the Judge's Chambers pub, and it was Tracy Gilligan that was sort of doing the negotiation, but she said it was her father that was sort of the owner of the whatever. But they were also selling 2 villas at that stage, which we never actually got to see, but they were offering them for sale, basically, 2 villas. And that's what I believe they had in that area. So Gilligan doesn't seem to be in communication with the family anymore. He's obviously, the relationship has maybe had its toll on whatever loyalties he would have had from his original family. Anyway, he was living in her property rent-free. Rent-free. While they both thought about things and how they were going to move forward. But of course, the next thing, he's caught up in this big pink cocaine bust. And we had videos of Sharon Oliver Martin, whatever name she goes by, of the property after the raid by the police. And the property was in bits. I mean, it had been torn apart, and Gilligan had been arrested and taken out of there and placed in Fort Callant prison. He hadn't the money to raise bail at that stage, and she initially did return to Spain in order to help him to try and raise some bail. But very quickly she seemed to have pulled away from that. Now Gilligan had, in her absence, had another romance. Which maybe didn't go down very well. But nonetheless, he always sort of tries to utilise what he can, and had been trying to keep in touch with her, had been hoping that she would be able to go around with his begging bowl. However, the text, I think, in recent weeks showed that he was on his own. But nonetheless, he has managed to, somebody has donated this money and he's out. What's next for John Gilligan? I reckon he's going to be papped by some tourist in Alicante. In around there, probably sitting having a drink at a pool or whatever, giving the same smoke grin. And I imagine being as confident as ever that he's going to beat these charges.
And of course, I mean, the social welfare system in Spain isn't as generous as here. So Gilligan may have to rely on his reputation and his contacts. Now, he has remained popular, or at least to a degree a figure of respectability in the criminal underworld, if not in the real world. And he does have associations with people on the Costa Blanca. He has people still go to him for advice. He has some younger associates that are still involved in the drugs business back in Dublin. And he's
also a very popular guy with the undercover police in Spain, who seem to have a particular liking of him. I mean, the operation which led to his arrest has been called Operation Overlord, and it involved officers from an elite Spanish anti-drugs unit, including one based in Murcia, south of Alicante, as well as the UK's National Crime Agency. And he was one of 9 people that were held. Pink cocaine is something that while Spanish law can be quite lax when it comes to cannabis, they're not so much so with cocaine, and particularly pink cocaine and these kind of synthetic drugs. They're dangerous. They're not liked. They don't like the idea that Spain is being seen as a place to make them.
No, and there was a number of Eastern Europeans arrested again with John Gilligan as part of those 9 people. So it does seem that, according to the Spanish police anyway, that this is a major drugs conspiracy that's involved in selling these synthetic drugs as party drugs really across that part of Spain.
I think the focus of it wasn't necessarily the selling of it. It was the fact that it was actually, they were making the drugs themselves there. So essentially they actually stated that the National Police had dismantled a synthetic drugs lab and that 9 people had been arrested. The leader of the criminal organisation, they describe a man belonging to the Irish Mafia who'd expanded his criminal activities to several parts of the eastern Spanish coast and continually changed home between the provinces of Murcia and Alicante to hinder his localisation. More than 16 kilos of 2C or pink cocaine have been seized, along with 2.5 kilos of cocaine, 540 litres of precursors for synthetic drugs, and a 75-litre drum of methylamphetamine. Lemon.
So it's been described as...
Which is a key precursor in the manufacture of methamphetamines. Officers have also confiscated different instruments and machinery needed to produce the drugs, as well as a revolver hidden among the bricks. Now, they described really John Gilligan as the head of that operation. We would not necessarily concur, as we don't usually concur sometimes with the statements of the Spanish police. When they arrested him, the last time running his postal service for drugs, they discovered what they believed to have been the gun that they believed he'd used, or the gang had used to murder Veronica Guerin. Irish police didn't agree that he would have kept that all this time as some sort of a trophy.
Yeah.
And indeed, it turned out through ballistic tests not to be. This John Gilligan is not in the realms. He's not up the ladder enough to be running a big operation like that. He is in the way of being employed by somebody else to do more menial jobs. And we saw his tick lists and his notes that were, seized at the time. And they were talking about collections of small amounts of money.
Yeah, so
€2,000 a time.
I'm not even that large. I mean, there was a couple for 200, 150 quid. So he had written notes offering people deals for, literally talking a couple of £100. So it doesn't seem to tally up with the fact that he was also in charge of this criminal conspiracy that was generating millions of euros worth of drugs as well. Now, as well, as you described, all those precursors, basically what those precursors are, and they're often imported from places like China. They're substances that might have legitimate industrial usage, but they can be converted to extract methamphetamine, basically. They have to be, but it's a very complex process. It's actually in the report from Jared Cousins, the Spanish reporter, he describes it as a Breaking Bad laboratory. Now, that is a complicated thing to do, and this was being done. Now, I don't think John Gilligan would have the sort of technical expertise or anything like that to set that up. Also, it is a complex process to get these precursor chemicals in, because there is, the international police forces are aware of what the misuse of these can be for.
But at the same time, you'd have to accept that a 73-year-old man had a use within that gang, because you wouldn't sort of necessarily hire the services of somebody of that age.
No,
I mean, the criminal underworld and etc. is a little bit ageist, in fairness. Usually somebody of Gilligan's calibre is sort of a mentor. He is often used for negotiations, for mediations, but it's unlikely that somebody of his age would be certainly employed as a hands-on operator. He does, however, have long-term associates, and he knows everybody, really. He's been around for a long time. So he would have been a great guy as a kind of an in-between, a fixer perhaps, somebody who would have been able to connect one person with another.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously there's huge amounts of transport needed, as they described themselves, locations, all of those things that John Gilligan could provide, addresses for things to be delivered, people to collect stuff. But there's obviously a huge conspiracy here. And it was a big deal for the Spanish police. As you said, it is a big target. And those drugs, where they may well be imported in other places, there certainly have been an escalation in the use of methamphetamine and other sort of party drugs, I suppose, in parts of Spain as well. Certainly cocaine is still the major, Spain's viewed as a landing port or a landing point for Europe wide distribution, but those drugs are also big business on through the tourist parts of Spain.
Now, John Gilligan has obviously made some friends and enemies in prison, and also he will be watching over his shoulder for the next while, because as with anybody that comes out of jail facing charges where there's others involved, possibly more influential younger people involved, there would be a worry that Gilligan would give information or try and do a plea deal in order to spend the rest of his life out of prison. So undoubtedly he's going to go to ground, but I still imagine some eagle-eyed Irish tourist out there might just see him somewhere.
Yeah, and may end up buying him a pint and taking a picture,
Let's wait and see. He might even give me a ring.
Yeah.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.